The Joe Rogan Experience.
But there's also a huge geopolitical, I hate misusing that word. I learned what the word geopolitical really means.
What does it really mean?
It means politics of earth things like waterways, oceans,
Oh,
dams.
interesting.
And so it's like,
I've always used it wrong too.
I go totally like autistic every time I say the word now. And I'm like, damn it, I know it means something different because we all use it wrong, but I'm going to use it wrong anyway. There's a geopolitical move from China right now called the Belt and Road Initiative. And the Belt and Road Initiative, that's tied to the BRICS. That's the idea is that the entire global south with China as its head is going to become the new epicenter, the superpower of the world. And it's going to be not just trade. I mean, China doesn't exactly trade on fair terms. They're going to go and basically exploit places. We'll build you a nice airport. We'll build you a nice port. We'll build you some highways. By the way, they all go straight to the mine, and we're taking all of your lithium when we come in. That's your deal. And now you're economically dependent on us. Pretty standard game that they're playing. And that Belt and Road Initiative actually is a competing interest to spreading democracy around the world. So I know Vivek Ramaswamy, really hit this out of the park where he said, we went over to China and said, let's spread democracy to China. So in a sense, we bit off way more than we could chew, if you want to think of it that way. Let's spread democracy to China. And China was like, ha, 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 yeah, let's see. And they flipped the table on us and made it so that if you want to get in the Chinese market, so first they become the manufacturing base of the world, but then if you want to play in the Chinese market, what do you have to do? Well, the CCP puts up a firewall, and if you don't play by the Chinese rules, you don't get into China. So now Nike and all these big, corporations and all these other NBA. I named Nike because it just keeps coming to mind. But there's a huge consumer market over there that's buying up stuff like crazy. That's one of the things I witnessed in China. Everybody's starting to have money, so they're buying up brand name stuff everywhere that they can all the time to show that they have some money now. And huge market. So they want into the market. The market's gigantic. It's a manufacturing base. So it's, relationships are built. But if you want to play, you play by Chinese rules. So spreading democracy partly didn't work because we have to play by China's rules. And that's the Belt and Road Initiative is meant to create a global South network. So we're the global North. That's, South America, parts of Africa, a lot of like Indonesia, India, and then China. Of course, BRICS just throws Russia into that mix, but otherwise that's who you're talking about. And China is setting itself up to be the kind of global superpower or hegemon of that entire project. And we're talking about, the flow of trillions of dollars of goods and oil and energy and whatever every year. So that's a huge thing to play with. And it turns out, I don't think, if we take Vivek's line, we got outfoxed in the deal. So spreading democracy, there are lots of these cultural reasons. Oh, they're not ready for democracy. I don't know. Maybe some places, maybe not some places. But there are other pressures, too, that we've been asleep to. We have not been paying attention as a country. Maybe some of our State Department people have been to China for the way that we should have been. Like we should have been in the 80s and 90s like, oh, no, China, right? But we were like, oh, yeah, China. Okay, cool. Yeah, go make all of our cheap stuff for us.
Well, they've done an amazing thing in combining communism with capitalism.
That's right.
If you just have North Korea, you never develop a real superpower.
Thank you, Joe. I beat this drum, and I get called crazy all the time because what I'm trying to tell people is that communism is what's happening to this country, okay? But it doesn't look like communism because it's like, how is Nike communist?
Right.
And I'm picking on Nike. No, how is Boeing? Let's pick on Boeing instead. How is Boeing communist? They've all these. How is Disney communist? Right? They're huge mega corporations. What did Google just lose over its stupid AI? $90 billion or something. It's something insane. Like, I didn't even know they had that much money to lose. And it's like, holy crap, in stockholder value or whatever, or shareholder value.
I think it was only $9 billion.
Was it? I thought that was Bud Light. That was 9.
No, Bud Light was 27.
But look at what we're like haggling over, like
insane amounts
11,
of money.
12 figure, I
know, right?
Yeah. And so it's like at least 10-figure numbers of money. Like, Elon kind of rolls in that department, but nobody else does. So anyways, where was I going with this? Because this is huge. Oh, the communist. How in the world are these huge things communist, right? So communism didn't work, right? Soviet Union sucked. North Korea sucked. Cuba sucks. Like, I'm sure it's like geographically beautiful, but we know those places are dysfunctional as hell.
Right.
We can go to the Eastern Bloc. They're still devastated in a lot of ways. They're still not all the way together. Like, communism didn't work. But if we think of like what Marx did, leading up to, say, 1917, when Lenin kind of took over, as communism 1.0. That never really even got off the ground. Then Lenin got it off the ground, and you get the Soviet model, which is, Soviet just means committee, by the way, if you didn't know that. It's like a ruling council or committee. So Soviet model takes over with what they called Marxism-Leninism, and that worked, kind of. It worked. They still had it in China till Mao died. They had it in Soviet Union until, 89, 90, 91, something like that when it fell. But what happened was when Mao died, like the Soviet Union wasn't doing great. It was starting to fall apart. A new model got picked up. And we talk about Mao Zedong sometimes, and I would love to talk to you all day about Mao. That's my new research project. But we don't talk about his successor. His successor was Deng Xiaoping. And this is where I actually disagree with Vivek about what I was just saying. Deng Xiaoping had a saying that was, I don't care if the cat is black or white, as long as it catches mice. And what he was talking about is, I don't care if we use markets or we use a Soviet-style central committee to organize our society, as long as China's economy comes back. That's what he really meant. And so Deng didn't come up with this new model to open the markets on his own. We didn't go to China to necessarily just to spread democracy. We went to build China. And who's we? Well, let's name the names. Who was in the meeting? And there's a movie about some of these meetings were in China, and there's not a movie, but there's a movie called Mr. Deng Goes to Washington that took place in Washington, D.C., so you can go watch the movie. I'm not making this up. Deng Xiaoping was the leader of China. He's already networking with Klaus Schwab from the World Economic Forum in his spacesuit, but he meets with, and the list of people were Henry Kissinger, Zbigniew Brzezinski, allegedly T.H. Chan, David Rockefeller, and the sitting new emperor or whatever, CCP chairman of China, Deng Xiaoping, and they cook up this plan to open Chinese markets. And the plan was to maybe to spread democracy into America, but I suspect it was mostly to get really rich. We open those markets, huge amount of money, giant multinational corporations are not tied to any geographical place, and they can get rich off their balls. Now, some of these guys, I think, were also ideologically motivated. The Rockefellers have funded communist crap all over the world for a very long time. China was communist. Deng Xiaoping said, well, I'm not opening the market for the market. I'm opening the market for socialism, to make socialism productive. And so they had I think there was more of a plan there than we take into account, which means Vivek gives, I need a tinfoil hat. Vivek sees that our motivations in building China were necessarily good. I think the motivations for building China were to create the pincher of a trap that's called Thucydides' trap in ancient kind of military strategy, that the only escape from would be to facilitate China's rise and decimate the West in order to avoid a nuclear-tipped World War III. And I think they knew what they were doing and were going to get rich on it.
You think by spreading democracy, their idea was to reinvigorate China's economy so that China becomes a threat?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. So as China gets, so the
that
Thucydides,
is so 4D chess. The back pages of Reddit conspiracy.
Well, listen, we know that Klaus Schwab is if there are conspiracies, the James Bond villain, kind of not quite out of central casting.
See the photo we have of him in the bathroom?
Yeah.
With the Darth Vader outfit on?
With the spacesuit. I'm the one who told you about his spacesuit. We put it up on the screen.
Yes.
Do you know who Klaus Schwab's mentor was?
I do, but I forgot.
Henry Kissinger.
That's right.
Who was in the same meeting. This was a Harvard plot.
His father was a Nazi.
I can't vet that for positive sure, but that's what I have heard.
What is the truth of that? Let's find out. Who is Klaus Schwab's father? At least his father did something. Like,
wasn't he the guy that was like bringing like the nuclear technology for the Nazis to South Africa or something like that?
Something crazy like that.
I mean, I know the story vaguely. I knew it at one point. But
look, you can't help who your father is. Right?
That's correct.
And if unfortunately, you get born, your dad's a Nazi.
I'm much less worried about Klaus being a Nazi than I am. Like, he has an interview he gave where he's in his office, and behind him, up on the bookshelf, is a bust of Lenin. How the hell did that get there? Like,
right.
Other than Jordan Peterson, who puts one of those up? Communists. And Jordan's studying them, and that's why he puts them up as a reminder. No shade at Jordan, obviously, but like Klaus has got some, big ambitions, I think. And his mentor was Kissinger.
Well, he's such a strange guy, the way he talks about it, too. It's so right out of a movie. Like, this cannot be real. No one is really, you will own nothing and you will be happy with that accent, and no one's freaking out.
I think that my favorite ones where he's having the conversation, he's like, yes, in some years we will all have the chips in our brains.
Yeah.
And so you will be sitting there and I will be sitting here and we will be having a conversation.
There was a false attribution.
So it's fake, inaccurate. WEF. This is from a book I read.
Yeah, this is Reuters.
Founder Klaus Schwab, family tree shared online. So what is the
Saying
inaccuracies?
that he was related to the Rothschild family.
Oh, that was the fake one.
Oh yeah, that because his mother is like super secret.
Okay, so that's fake.
Not true.
That's not true. But the thing about his father.
That's why I mean, this is explaining what his father was too. His
Okay.
mother was Jewish.
And his father did what?
Well, if his father was
Don't
Nazi,
open that
makes
can.
sense.
Oh my
Well, I
God.
mean, that's the whole thing with Soros, though. You know, Soros was Jewish, and his uncle took him around as a young boy when they confiscated property from the Jews, and he had to pretend that he was a Christian.
Yeah. Did you ever see the interview
Hold
with?
up, so who is his dad?
I mean, I'm trying to get to something that says it, but
Okay,
there's not.
we should really clarify that, not
Yeah,
miss it. Okay,
Eugen
so who is this gentleman?
Wilhelm.
What did he do?
Here's
Wilhelm, what
political
did you
fact.
do? Okay. Did Soros's or Klaus Schwab's father work for Hitler?
False.
Claim George Soros worked for Hitler. Klaus. Okay, but what did his dad do?
I gotta
Because this
research it.
book book that I read was about elite power structures, and they go into the World Economic Forum. I wish I could remember exactly what they were saying, but it was something to the tune of who his dad worked with.
Well, I'll just be clear, since you have the tinfoil hat right now, Joe, my source for his mentor being Kissinger is a book that was published by the World Economic Forum called The World Economic Forum, The First 40 Years, which was published in 2011 to brag about how cool they've been. He also brags that in 78, he started making connections to Deng Xiaoping and trying to bring the stakeholder, as he called it, capitalism model into China, which is what China actually installed. It's this dirty fusion of neoliberalism, which is basically how do you get huge corporations to basically suck off of the government, and that's the thing the left has been mad about for 50 years. How do you fuse that to communism? And China's the answer. And what I think is all this ESG stuff was constructed around it to make the West have it too.
So environmentalism, what is it? Environmental social governance?
That's right, yeah.
That's ESG.
Yeah.
And that stands for what is the goal of ESG?
Corporate
the
control.
Stated goal. But the stated
So
goal.
it is to create a metric, a measurement tool to assess the likely long-term viability of a corporation based on its environmental, social, and internal corporate governance policies.
Long-term viability for the nation?
No, for the corporation.
For the corporation.
Because here's what's going on is ESG was created at the United Nations in 2003 by a guy named James Gifford. And the point was, he said, well, there's at that point about $6 trillion of money that's sitting out there. It's people's pensions. It's like passive, right? Mutual funds, index fund, all this, mutual funds particularly, 401ks. There's state pension funds in particular, $6 trillion in the world sitting out there that's just people's retirement funds gaining interest, playing in the market through this, money management. And the question James Gifford asked was how he was a forest guy. He was like, how do we apply that to saving the forests, save the trees, right? And so he came up with this idea that if we had environmental assessments, anytime you have a metric, you can use that metric in some way or another. In other words, or you can game that metric. If we had metrics to say, well, how environmentally compliant are companies? Like kind of an extension of corporate social responsibility, they used to call it. If we can measure that, then what we can do is we can start directing, we can say, well, companies that have a long-term or that have good environmental policy have a better long-term portfolio. But these are 30-year investments because they're people's pensions. So that's long-term success that we're interested in, not boom and bust cycles in the market. So the stated ambition, not just to do what I said, but is specifically to do that, to bring that passively invested money into what they call impact investing. In other words, to do activism with investor money by investing in, green energy companies or green other environmental companies or socially just companies or, companies with good governance. And in principle, at least the good governance thing should work. But the thing is corruption exists. I don't know how they neglected to account for that if we give them all the credit in the world.